Hi guys, it's Amelia. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you guys all about how I got into PA school. If you're new here, I'm Amelia again. I just got into PA school where I'll be starting in January. I'm super excited and I've worked really hard during undergrad, and so I'm excited to share a little bit more about how I did it and give some encouragement and tips to you guys because I know you can do it too. So if you're pre-PA, just wondering about the PA profession or PA school really in general, then I'm here to help. I'm here to give tips and anything else. So also sorry if you see my cat in the background. She likes playing and she likes being near me at all times. So just it's okay if you're distracted by her because she's pretty cute. So to give a little bit of a backstory about my journey to PA school, why I decided to go to PA school when I was 14 and 16, so in 2019 and 2018, I had two little brothers who were born. One of them I got to be in the delivery room with, and I cut his umbilical cord, and watching them grow up, especially during COVID where I was home a lot, I got to see how they developed, the things that they learned, how their brain worked, and that kind of sparked my interest in medicine, along with my mom being a physician. So she's always introduced me to medicine and taught me things, and I eventually realized I was really interested in it. So in 2021, I started at Clemson University in South Carolina. I started as a biology major, and that's what I ended up getting. I did biology because I liked my AP Bio class. I did well on that AP exam, and so I decided to study it further. So while I was at Clemson, I also did ROTC, which trained me to become an Army officer upon graduation. And it added a lot. I got a lot of responsibilities and experience out of it, but it also made life pretty busy, so I can talk about that later too. My junior year is when I heard more about the PA profession and I decided to fully pursue it. So I got a job in home health at Clemson, a student who has spinal muscular atrophy, and she's in a motorized wheelchair, so she needed constant care. So I helped her with activities of daily living, and it was a great experience, and I learned a lot about advocating for people with disabilities, and I'm very thankful for that experience. So that was my main PCE hours on my application, but I also did shadowing of a physician assistant in a National Guard unit as a way to fulfill my monthly duties to the National Guard while I was a cadet. So I did that, and I got a lot of shadowing hours out of that, which I'm very thankful for. And I also did shadow of PA in the emergency department. And then spring 2025 is when I took the GRE, graduated from Clemson, and then turned in my CASPA application. I also got married that summer, but then I heard back and I interviewed and got accepted. So I'll go into a little bit of my stats, which I do want to share just to be open and honest, but please do not use this as a way to compare or say, oh, she got in because she had whatever. It's not about that. It's more about your holistic application. But before I share that, I do want to say that I did end up applying to just one school because my husband was going to law school at this school. So I knew I didn't want to go to a different school, live in a different city. So just wanted to give that disclosure because I did tailor some of my hours and experiences around that because I knew I was applying to one school. So my overall GPA in my biology degree was a 3.69, and then my science GPA was a 3.51. I applied with around 800-ish hours of healthcare hours, patient care hours, whatever hours that the school wanted, because they do count shadowing and scribing within those hours. And so 600, 700 of it were the home health, and then 150 was all shadowing. And then I also did around 200 volunteer hours in my RTC volunteering, rural healthcare volunteering in the Clemson area, and I did go on a medical mission trip to Peru. For my GRE, I got a 315, which my school said that they gave more consideration to applicants who got a 297 or a 300 and above, and so I just worked to score above that, and I did that, which I used Magoosh to study. I do highly recommend that. I probably only intensely studied for a month, my whole senior year, do some light studying for that, a bunch of practice problems, understanding what I needed to learn, but it was really for that last month in April that I was intensely studying every day. And I have heard that the GRE, you just want to make sure that you can get a good score, but they don't count it. It's not like the LSAT or the MCAT where every point counts. It's more like it's a red flag if you can't get or a normal score, but if you do just fine and well, then it's not really a big green flag to them, I guess. They don't care if it's a red flag, if that makes sense. For prereqs, I was really able to get them all with my biology degree. The only thing I had to add on was microbio, which like I could take with my degree. I just didn't choose to do that specific science class, but I just added it on the fall of my senior year. And then I took medical terminology, which I didn't have to for my degree, but it was super easy because all of those are easy to sign up for as biology major. Look for your prereqs really early and make sure you can work it into your degree. For my personal statement, it was definitely a work in progress over a while, but in May is when I really nailed it down because I was graduating and doing the GRE, so I knew I kind of needed to focus on it after all of that. And I know people say to start early and get as much done early, but that's just what worked for me because I knew I would have more time after I graduated not doing as much, so I had more time to devote to that. Personally, I went in chronological order almost of how I was introduced to the profession and some experiences, big experiences that led me to understand why I wanted to be a PA. So, for example, how I got introduced, I told the story of cutting my brother's umbilical cord and my mom introducing me to medicine, and then I talked about school, ROTC, my home health experiences. I tied all of those back to why I wanted to be a PA. And then I ended the personal statement with another story about that same brother. He got injured, so I wanted to help him, and why I wanted to be able to help people who are in crisis or just needing healthcare, but I didn't feel equipped. So I think with a personal statement, it's not like a formula. I really think that programs want to know why you want to be a PA. It's not just about numbers. Of course, numbers are important, but they do really care if you want to be a PA or not. Which sounds obvious, but I'm just saying if you don't really sound like your heart's really in it, that might be more of a red flag than a low number. For editing it, I did have my husband and my mom read it. My mom has always been someone who's edited my essays and helped me. She's a really good writer, so that's who I mainly relied on, but I don't think it's a bad idea to invest in those people who will like professionals who will edit your personal statement. If you feel overwhelmed or feel like you don't have anyone to talk to about your personal statement, it might be good to have someone who has seen that side or gone to PA school. I also used Savannah Perry's personal statement guide, the PA platform. I thought that was helpful to have it all in one book to read about it. And then YouTube videos, things like that are helpful too. So just do a lot of research, get a lot of opinions, but stick to your gut. Really just portray why you want to be a PA. For letters of recommendation, I asked for ones from the PA at the National Guard unit that I shadowed, the student that I worked for in home health, the PA that I shadowed in the emergency room, and then an instructor of ROTC. So I thought that was a good mix. I think some schools require 3. I know my school required 3, but I did 4. And then I sent them an email late March, early April to ask them, and then also let them know that I would be sending them a link to CASPA that opened on April 25th or whatever. And then the way that I said this was formally asking them to write a letter of recommendation explaining how they impacted me or what they taught me or why they pushed me to want to be a PA even more. And some specific experience that you remember with them that had a profound impact on you. And then for some of them that didn't know me as well, I wrote out things like my GPA, my healthcare hours, other accomplishments. If they wanted some more stuff to write about, it kind of depended on the person. I also made sure to ask them to keep it general. They knew the school that I was applying for, but I still asked them to keep it general, saying I highly recommend them to go to your physician assistant school, saying that very generally, so it's not pointed at one. So I think that's all the major parts of the CASPA application. So I wanted to move on to some tips that I found to be helpful. My biggest one is to just work on a little bit of something every day. Have a list of what you need to do, but choose something little that you can do every day. That way you're chipping at it a little bit at a time rather than it feeling like this big thing that you have to do all in one day. I'm gonna work on just writing down this part of my personal statement or this paragraph of it, or I'm gonna plug in numbers into my transcript on this day, and just working on it every day will maybe stop you from being overwhelmed. I would also recommend making it fun. I know it is very stressful and you might be doing other things like school or working, or maybe you have a family, at the same time, but you can make it fun. Go to a coffee shop and get a fun coffee and work on your application there, almost like you're doing schoolwork. I would also plan it out. A lot of people post online like when you need to have whatever done by, but do your own research, realize what's realistic for you, because some things I did pretty late into the cycle that I knew that I could do because of the timing of the school, but also because of my timing, because I was graduating, getting married, things like that. So you don't have to feel stressed about other people's deadlines, but set your own deadlines and stick to them so that you don't feel overwhelmed all of a sudden. It's when you wanted to turn your application in and you haven't been able to finish anything yet. So set yourself up for success in that way. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't think it's a bad thing to invest in outside help if you feel overwhelmed, especially if this is your first cycle, you don't know what you're doing, maybe you don't have a good support system or people who have been in the medical field before. I don't think it's a bad thing to ask those resources that are online for help. So moving on from that is the interview. And so I received my interview invite in early August after the CASPA application was due. I was super excited because I knew that meant that I was done with what I thought was the hard part, getting the admissions committee to see my numbers, which I was worried weren't enough. But I knew that once I got the chance to talk to them in person, I would be able to really show them who I am and why I want to be a PA. So I was excited. I felt very confident, but there was still a lot of preparation to do. So here are some of my prep tips, but definitely comment down below if you think that I should do a more separate, specific nitty-gritty interview video, because I loved it and I would definitely love to give my tips to everybody. But a few general ones, I started with the Savannah Perry's interview prep book, the PA Platform interview prep book. Again, just something, having it all written down in one spot was really helpful. I do think it's important to kind of diversify who you get advice from, so not just that book, because there are other resources out there that maybe can give you some different tips. So like I said earlier, you've made it on paper. Once you get that interview, you just kind of have to showcase who you are. This sounds a little cheesy, but make sure you read the mission statement of your school, because it might actually help you focus your mindset on what they think is important. For example, my school's mission says something about training compassionate and competent PAs, and it's so funny because I looked back in my personal statement before I had even really looked at the mission statement too much, but I wrote literally the words competent and compassionate, and so I realized this is even better sign that I'm applying here because our values align. But I also used it to make sure I focused on those values when I was talking in my interview. Most important thing is to really nail down your answer of tell me about yourself and why you want to be a PA. Having that down, not necessarily rote memorization that you just are spitting out this paragraph of information, but you know exactly what you want to hit and what you want to tell those interviewers. Those two specific questions, definitely. I also recommend in the weeks or however many days you have to prep for the interview, just word vomit on piece of paper everything about your experiences that you've done, what you did exactly, explain it to someone who's never seen it before, what you learned from it, how you think it would make you a better PA. If you have all of that information just in your head, already out on paper, you've already thought through it all, it'll be a lot easier to access when you get a question in an interview. And then what I did was I took from the question bank in the interview prep book, I just did a few questions a day. And it actually worked out because one of the random questions, define professionalism, was actually asked on my interview day. And if I hadn't had thought through that answer before, even though it kind of sounded a little silly, I would have not known what to say or just made up something random that might not have been as well spoken as what I actually said on the interview. I also recommend doing a mock interview. That was the most important. You can do it through the PA platform, which is what I did, and I had a really good experience. But you can also just get a close family member, friend, anybody, maybe even a PA that you shadow or work for, or a doctor, to just ask you a few questions and sit down. All you really need to do is just have one experience of being nervous. Even if there's no high stakes, you need to practice being nervous and having to come up with answers on the spot. And then if someone is a little bit more knowledgeable about that PA admissions process, they can really help you fine-tune your interview answers. And so I would personally love to help anybody who needs any help. Right now, I'll do it for free, just talk to anybody. So comment, DM me. I'd love to set up anything. I feel like I could really help people with their interview and interview prep, so just let me know. And of course, I can do more interview videos in the future, so look out for that. I just have some words of advice to all the pre-PAs out there. First and foremost, I would say to put 110% into everything that you do. It sounds cheesy, but in all of your experiences, even if it is PA related healthcare or not, you should put everything that you can into those experiences, because you never know who's watching, you never know who's connected to who, you never know who could be a reference someday. And I think you should do that anyways, but especially if you're pursuing something like this, a professional degree, you really need to be mindful of how you're presenting yourself and how people would describe you, how they would describe your work ethic. So keep that in mind. Also, something that really helped me was having a big Excel spreadsheet of all of my hours. I tracked everything by the hour, but I also wrote down experiences, thoughts, things I'm passionate about, things that happen. Every time they happen in over 2 or 3 years, it was so helpful to look back on when I was writing my personal statement and preparing for the interview, that I had all of that stuff that I would have forgot about if I didn't have it written down. So definitely do that. And then also, I would recommend to stay off of places like Reddit and other forums. They can be helpful if you have a technical question, but don't just go scroll on there, because that's where you get into the numbers and the comparison and thinking that you might not be able to get there, because that's just not going to help you. That's not constructive. So stay focused on what you can do to improve your application and what you can do to showcase to those PA programs that you're going to be a great PA. So that's all I have to say about how I got into PA school right now. Make sure to follow along with my journey. I want to just encourage everybody that you can do it too. You can become a PA, you can get into PA school. It just will take some hard work and figuring out what exactly those PA schools are looking for. So follow my Instagram at Scrapbook of Amelia to see my everyday day-to-day life of working as a medical assistant right now, things that I do outside of work, exercise, fun times. But also when I start PA school, I'll have a lot more content focused on that. And then like and subscribe to my channel and this video, and I'll see you in my next video.